My name is Antonio Kung. I'm the CTO of a company called Trialog. I'm French. It's a French company. But actually here I'm involved in standardization. It's fully international. My background is engineering, so very much like the others, because I'm not going to talk about regulation. Well, as an expert at least. Okay. I've been involved in standardization since 2014, and I started in OASIS in 2014. But as you can see, everything exploded, so we have lots of activities ongoing, and you'll see when I make my presentation. Okay. So I'm involved in privacy engineering, big data, privacy in smart cities, privacy guidelines in the IoT, and as I said, I started with OASIS PMRM. I'm also involved in other undertakings where we discuss issues such as the European Innovation Platform, Smart Cities and Communities. That's for smart cities. I'm leading an initiative called Citizen Approach to Data, Privacy by Design. And I was the coordinator of Prepare. You see Prepare mentioned several times, and I will explain why. It was a support action to deal with privacy by design, and we came up with some contributions. I like also to see that because it's exploding world, lots of things are ongoing, and there is a community called IPAN, Internet Privacy Engineering Network, that is initiated and chaired by EDPS, which will become EDPB. And as an IPAN member, I am managing a wiki. This is a website. You can have access to it. And this is where we put all the information concerning privacy standards, the status, what's going on, and things like that. My company is SME. We work on basically cyber-physical systems, smart grids, health, e-mobility, and we just created the business unit cybersecurity and privacy last year. Okay, I've been involved in security since year 2000, in particular to connected vehicles. I was part of a project called Sevecom where we realized that we couldn't have a fixed MAC address for each vehicle, and this is where actually the standard was changed at that time, and we have actually when it comes to car-to-car addresses that are actually dynamic. Okay, we call them pseudonyms. Okay, I've been involved in privacy since 2007, and the Prepare project is being a European project. We could become a member of OASIS, and we created the liaison with ISO, and this is how I started standardization. Okay. Prepare is finished because those European projects, we have contracts, but actually the liaison is ongoing, and there is a new project called Create IoT, which is a support project on supporting IoT in general, and I'm focusing on security and privacy. The outline of my presentation is, first of all, I'm going to make a presentation from a policy-making viewpoint. I'm going to show an overview of standards. I will focus on security and privacy in the IoT and explain the content of 27550, privacy engineering. From a policymaker viewpoint, the best viewpoint I really think is the example of smart cities. We have smart cities everywhere in the world, okay? And we have to deal with lots of data concerning our citizens. The policymaker has to deal with very complex ecosystems. Okay? When I'm talking about ecosystem, we talk about smart cities, IoTs, and big data. Okay? They go together. They are very complex. Okay? And also we have lots of domains. We have smart grids, transport, health, and others. Okay? And we have concerns. So here we focus on privacy. Of course, we also have to focus on cybersecurity. And of course, we have to focus on other transversal concerns, such as safety, availability, and things like that. Okay. The policymaker, so this is a slide Mike has mentioned quite a bit, so I'm going to be fast, but we have to take into account the GDPR in Europe. Okay. We have those concept data controllers, data processors. We have to nominate data protection officers. I was told there will be 50,000 DPOs that will be hired in the next 2 years, okay? And we have the sanction for breaches, okay, which Mike has mentioned, okay? I also want to mention that the GDPR is Europe, but it also influenced lots of countries. And in the last ISO meeting, we had the privacy commissioner for Philippines that was present. He was present, and we asked him whether he was following GDPR, and he said their legislation is following a version, initial version of the GDPR. Okay, so it's going to be pretty much consistent with the European version. The policymaker must understand a number of terms. So privacy by design, okay? Actually, in the GDPR, we say data protection by design, okay? And basically, this means the integration of privacy concern in the engineering of systems, but also institutionalization of privacy management in an organization, okay? We have privacy by default. This is one of the principles of Anne Cavoukian, so highest level of protection by default. We need to carry out privacy impact assessment, so a process which evaluates impact on privacy. Okay. And the policymaker has to deal with very complex ecosystem. Okay. Here in this slide, I'm showing the ecosystem in terms of privacy. Okay. So we have the citizen on top, then data controllers, data processors. And below we have the integrators, who is in charge of providing the application, and we have suppliers, okay? They have different duties, different roles. So the data controller, data processor, their main concern is they have to comply with privacy obligations, okay? The integrator, okay, he has to apply privacy impact assessment, privacy by design, and he knows the purpose. That's a very important concept of privacy. It's you have to explain the purpose for which you collect data. Okay, and the supplier, he has to follow requirements. So he's below in the stack, but he doesn't know the purpose. So he has to comply with the requirements that will be provided by other stakeholders. Okay. Well, of course, the main stakeholder will be the municipality stakeholder. So here we have to handle, let's say, interactions with citizens. Okay, they will ask, "What are you doing with my data?" Or they will complain. So this is a very important part of the future activities of the municipality stakeholder. Okay. He will have to make sure that PIAs and agreement for data exchange are properly done, and who have access to it, be able to audit it, things like that. And he will also provide contracts to stakeholders to operate the smart city. Now, if we take an IoT viewpoint, I would say it's mainly a supply chain viewpoint, okay? Below, you have all the things, the objects, the technologies, okay? So everything you can think of is below, okay? Even in the cloud, you could consider it's part of a thing, okay? And then you have to integrate that. So the suppliers, they do not know the purpose, but the integrator knows. So he has to integrate this, and then you will build on top of it applications, and you have operators, okay? The operators, they will have to carry out the privacy impact assessment, okay? And they will have to deal with the city. So on top, the smart city officer, he have to deal with the myriads of privacy impact assessments that could be associated with each applications, okay? You see right away there is a management issue, okay? So when it comes to GDPR, you have privacy engineering, but on top you have management, okay? And management is the thing we know how to do, so we need to just to apply. We must integrate that in our picture, okay? Now, if you think about the big data, it's nearly the same, but a little bit different, so I call it the sharing chain, okay? So everything has been collected. Now you have data sets, and you are manipulating data sets. You are exchanging and so forth, okay? So you are providing your data set to another stakeholder. So you need to have data sharing agreements, okay? By the way, the data sharing agreements will, of course, focus on privacy obligations, but it will also, for business, focus on IPR issues, okay? Confidentiality and things like that, things you want to protect. So the data sharing agreements include those two parts, okay? But at the smart city level for privacy, you need to have an access to what has been agreed between the different stakeholders. Because at the end of the day, even though the city is not the controller, well, it might be a controller, but even if it's not a controller, it's going to be somehow liable. Okay. Now, if we look at the overall ecosystem from top to bottom, so you have the policymaker, the operators, and the suppliers, okay, you have three types of concerns, amongst others, okay? First of all, the legal compliance concern, secondly, the management concern, and thirdly, the system lifecycle concern. When you build a system, how do you do it, okay? The policymaker, he's interested by compliance, okay? He's interested to follow standards. He's interested by transparency, okay? The operators, well, they need to operate, so they need to follow the regulations. So they have to comply with the GDPR. They have to provide the PIAs, the data sharing agreements. They have to carry out privacy by design, okay? And the suppliers, well, they just follow the operator's requirements. So we need to provide to them guidelines so that actually they do it properly. From a smart city viewpoint, the problem is management. And lots of initiatives are wondering how they are going to handle it, okay? So there is a big project called Sharing Cities. It's led by London, the London city, okay? And I was invited to help them to create a program of GDPR compliance. So we are still in the process, actually. And we have 3 steps. So first of all, in March, we had a workshop on use cases. We're trying to understand what's going on and how we should do it, okay? And then in June, we'll have another workshop where we'll go more in detail. We'll try to carry out PIAs. And then the goal will be to apply a management plan for GDPR compliance, okay? But what's very interesting is the thing on the right, okay? It's the content of what could be guidelines for the future, okay? So first of all, you need to come up with a privacy management plan, okay? And privacy management plan, of course, you have the governance scheme, who is deciding, who is liable, and things like that. The role and duties, okay? Data controllers, data processors, and suppliers, okay? And the resources and staff, because you need to, if you do management, you have to staff the resources to do the proper management, okay? Then you do the management. And the management, actually, you have to have a repository of PIAs and data sharing agreements. If a problem occurs, you need to check and trace back to the PIA that might have a problem and things like that, okay? You need to interact with the citizens. So maybe for transparency, you have to inform, so maybe you have a dashboard, things like that, okay? But you also must handle complaints. So the citizen can ask, well, I'm complaining because apparently you're doing something and it's not correct, okay? And you have to deal with that. And as Mike said, we have breach management. You have to anticipate the fact that you will have breach management and to make sure that you have the teams that will be able to handle that, the competence to handle that, the PR, but also the technical audit things and the PR that will handle that, okay? And of course, continuous improvement, because if you have breach, you must improve. And if you have continuous improvement, then you are in the virtuous cycle, okay? And of course, to help, you need to come up with templates, okay? I'm very happy to mention that it's true, ICO have good templates. If you go to the UK website, so the PIA template, data sharing agreement template, privacy notice template, well, the last one, supplier privacy support is new, so we have to come up with something like that, okay? But we can start with good inputs, and then hopefully we can improve them so that actually it can be adopted by whole of Europe and beyond, okay? So now let's go to the overview of standards. This is my view. I'm trying to share it with people to convince. Maybe I'm wrong, but it gives at least some directions, okay? So we have here below the general privacy standards. Some of them are already they are existing or in the progress, okay? So 29100 privacy framework is basically the privacy principles, okay? This is very stable. It has been around for 4 or 5 years, okay? Then we have privacy impact assessment. This is going to be published this year. So this is quite stable. It has been, they've been working on it for 4 or 5 years, okay? Privacy engineering, 27550, I will present it. It's very new, it started last year, okay? And we have code of practice for PII protection, 29151. This is already nearly published, okay? I think it's FDIS right now. And we have a new one, which is, I call it Privacy Information Management Systems, of PIMS, okay? 27552. It's actually the privacy management viewpoint. So we're starting to touch upon the privacy management issues, okay? So this one, just to be frank, it's a copy and paste from the same version on security. So the good thing is it's very stable, okay? We will, and it's going to be available very fast, 27552, because we take it into account the maturity of the people on security management. Of course, we have to adapt it to privacy, okay? And then we have OASIS PMRM, okay? So I need to pay some tribute to John, because OASIS PMRM was the only standard that was existing when we started the PREPARE project in 2014, 13-14, okay? And there are a number of, so I'll come back to that, but there are a number of features of OASIS PMRM that I highlight later, okay? Now, concerning privacy standards for IoT, you have to know that there are lots of working groups that are working in standardization level that are thinking about what should we do about IoT, okay? So I'm part of a study period, they call it study periods, where actually ISO is thinking, okay, what should we do, okay? This has been ongoing for 3-4 years, okay? And it seems that now we are going to converge into a major standards on private security and privacy guidelines for the IoT. I'll come back to that, okay? Concerning big data, it's already ongoing because NIST in the US started an initiative on big data in general, okay? And one of the standards that they had in mind was security and privacy. So the last year they proposed it to ISO, and well, 1.5 years ago, I would say. And there is a standard 2547 part 4, which is security and privacy on big data, in which I'm involved, okay? And last but not least, the privacy standards for smart cities, okay? So here we have a number of initiatives. So we have working group 11 in ISO GTC1, which is smart cities, is led by China, okay? And it's on smart cities in general. It's not on security and privacy, it's on smart cities in general, okay? And in ISO SC27, I am the rapporteur of a study group on privacy in smart cities, okay? And we're trying to work together. In parallel, okay, you have ITU. So ITU is International Telecommunication Union. It's in Geneva. It's an agency of the United Nations. It's very strong on standardization. They publish lots of standards, okay? And they just created a working group. They call it a focus group on IoT and smart cities, okay? The first meeting will take place in Geneva in July. So I'm telling you this because I just got the invitation this morning to get there, okay? I learned about it this morning, okay? So it's pretty fresh, okay? So when it comes to ISO IEC standards, as I said, we have those standards, okay? On top, I would say the 3 pillars, okay? Privacy framework, privacy impact assessment, the code of practice for PI protection. By the way, 29151 is a joint standard between ISO and ITU. It will have, yes?
Will you be making your slides available?
Yeah, it's available, okay. Then we have the 27550, 551, 552, which were started this summer, well, last summer actually, okay? And you see the numbering, 27550, okay? So there was an attempt, just between you and me, to have, let's say, all privacy standards starting with 27500, because 27000 is for security, so 27500 would be for privacy. just that 27500 is already used. So they started with 27550, okay? So the next one will be 27553. Not sure which one, maybe on IoT, maybe on smart cities, okay? And we have the big data that is already ongoing, plus the study period. So in ISO, the way they handle is we have study periods where people work together and try to understand whether there is a need to go for a standard, okay? Sometimes it fails, sometimes it succeeds, okay? It depends on the maturity, the consensus, and also the involvement of people. Okay? So I like to get now a little bit to IoT, because IoT is first of all, it's my own specialty, and I think it's very interesting to see how we can handle the IoT in terms of privacy and privacy standards, privacy engineering, okay? So I skip a slide, but it doesn't matter, okay? So first of all, there is an abstract viewpoint. Everyone understands this, right? That actually the idea about the IoT, Internet of Things, is you have applications that can rely on capabilities provided by things, okay? Things are very general things. In general, people think about sensors, okay, wearables, things like that. But actually, it could be a more complex system. So, for instance, a vehicle could be a thing, okay? A robot could be a thing, okay? Now, in order to make it fly, and this is the promise of IoT, is that actually you will have interoperability, that actually an application can benefit from the capabilities provided by any other thing, okay? But of course, for this to work, you have to have standards, approaches, consensus on semantic interoperability, okay? So what's the relationship between this and security and privacy, okay? So you have to consider the ecosystem. So the IoT system stakeholders, when they design IoT systems, okay, you have the supplier, and today you have the user involved, because we're talking about user-centric design, which is good news, because when it comes to privacy, then he will have his requirements taken into account, okay? So if you do this, you need to come up with the IoT function, but not only, okay? You also need to come up with the design of security, privacy, safety, and other transversal capabilities. So this is IoT, okay? It's not only the application, it's both applications and the transversal things, okay? Now, once you have designed it, you have to procure, you have to make it happen. So that's the procurement, okay? So you have the suppliers and the platform suppliers, the application suppliers. In many cases, we make distinction between the application and the platform, okay? They will have to supply the marketplace, okay? And of course, in the procurement, you have to express the capabilities that you have created. So in terms of IoT functions, security, privacy, safety, okay? And then you have to deploy, okay? And this is where the operators will be involved. So you have, in general, it's a simplified version, but you have the operator of the application, for instance, a smart transport application, and the operator of the platform, for instance, a cloud platform, okay? And they will operate, but they also need to take into account the function, security, privacy, safety. So to me, when it comes to security and privacy guidelines, you have to take into account this picture, okay? Why do we go into that kind of picture? Because the liability is with the operators, not with the designers, okay? Of course, the designers has to make sure that it meets the requirements of the operators. So we need to show that. And secondly, privacy engineering is the suppliers. So we need to have this chain well understood, okay, so that the responsibility is clear. So the approach we have been proposing is that actually, when it comes to security and privacy, we need to have a thinking about how we design the thing, okay? The thing is something which is actually a vehicle, a sensor, storage, and things like that, okay? And we need to see how we can ensure what I call security and privacy by design for the thing, okay? We need to do the same for the application. For the application, is more understandable because it's the end application. It's what the user sees, okay? And he's responsible for the whole thing, by the way, okay? So he will have an integration issue of the things, okay? But in order to make it properly work, you need to provide a good description of the thing. So this is what we say, security and privacy service description. So we've been discussing this. So how are we able to describe security and privacy service capabilities, which actually the application can integrate, but also associate information about levels of privacy, levels of security. So those are things we are discussing. Okay. Just want to mention that there were 4 proposals for standardization made in the previous meeting in ISO in Hamilton. It was in April. One from Canada, one from Japan, one from the Cloud Security Alliance, and one from, I would say, Prepare or France, okay? Because I presented it to the French, in ISO, it's country-led, okay? So it's because there were 4 common, nearly similar proposals, they decided to work for the creation of a standard that hopefully will be launched next semester, okay? So now let's go to 27550, which is privacy engineering, okay? 27550 is related to OASIS PMRM. It was invented because of OASIS PMRM, I have to say, okay? So what it is we have said about the definitions of privacy engineering, so you saw a number of them, okay? So I just want to say that you want to integrate privacy concern in the life cycle. And this picture comes from Prepare, where you see each bubble is a process, okay, of the life cycle, okay? But very importantly, it's not only the process of developing a system, but also the environment infrastructure, which is actually the organization in which you develop the system, okay? So you must not only integrate privacy in the development system, but you must also integrate privacy in the management and the way you organize the company, okay? One of the new things that we have included is what you call beyond CIA, okay? Security is about confidentiality, integrity, and availability, okay? There is lots of work, mainly in Europe and in Germany, actually, where there was proposal to come up with 3 additional property goals: unlinkability, intervenability, transparency, okay? So when I started work on 27550, I thought, okay, this is going to be accepted, but we are still in an agreement process, okay? NIST has proposed 3 objectives that are a little bit similar, but a little bit different. They call it predictability, manageability, dissociability, okay? And we're still discussing, actually, and you'll see that in 27550, those concepts are put in an annex, because we say, okay, we're still thinking about them, we are progressing, we have not consented, but not far, and this is the situation, okay? So what is the structure of 27550, okay? So we believe that the most important was to show something that would be useful to the engineer, okay? In order to have that, we followed ISO 15288, which is System Lifecycle Process, okay? It's a standard. We often say it's the star standard in SC7, okay? System and Software Engineering. And they define a number of processes. Each sub-bullet is a process, okay? And the engineer, the experienced engineer, will recognize all the processes, okay? It's very well structured, it's very general. And what we decided is to focus on those processes where we have something to say about privacy, okay? So those are the things in red here. So now a little bit more about the content. The first very important thing is how we integrate risk analysis and privacy impact assessment, okay? When it comes to a risk analysis, the first thing is you need to identify what are the privacy breaches that you could have to cope with, okay? And those privacy breaches are initiated by risk sources, okay? So it could be of two kinds. First of all, the system itself has some vulnerabilities. So for instance, you store data and the data is not encrypted, so something like that. Or someone is hacking into your system and get access to the data, okay? But also you have the processing itself. So it could be that a company is providing the data, so for instance, a bank to an insurance, or it could be that an employee is telling something to another person, okay? So those are two types of risks, okay? And of course, you need to evaluate the consequences. Consequences, you have all kinds of consequences, but at least two that are important. One on privacy to the individual, okay? And one is the impact on the organization, okay? You could have others, you have societal impact, things like that, okay? And so, sorry. So the focus is a little bit different depending on where you look at. So below security, on top privacy. And actually, if you think about privacy impact assessment, then it's the thing on the top, okay? You focus on citizen privacy. And when you have evaluated the consequences, you have to come up with measures, okay? So you have two types of measures, okay? Organizational and technical. One thing I want to highlight is that in the processes, it's iteration-based, okay? So when you design a system, you start with the principles, you analyze, you come up with requirements, and then you come up with architectures and technologies, okay? But throughout the process, privacy by design lifecycle process, you have to check in terms of risk whether you improved your management of risk. So it's iteration-based. Okay.
Or question, I'm
yes.
sorry. Are you referencing Agile versus, you had talked about waterfall before with the system development lifecycle. Are you referencing Agile with the iteration concept?
That's a very good question. Yeah, so 1528 is not referencing Agile programming, okay? But my text is, because actually you need to give hints how it's going to take place when you do not use a standard waterfall approach, okay? So basically, the option taken in ISO is that this will be, of course, taken into account at the Agile process standards level, and we will mention how this deal with, okay? But of course, you need to the answer is yes, yes. Okay. So a few examples. So again, PMRM is providing this table about services, okay? So now I need to highlight what I think are to me the three top features of OASIS PMRM. First of all, this one is the top one to me, is actually, it explains to you how you start from privacy principles and how you have to come up with operational requirements, okay? Services, okay? And you have a list here, okay? And so let me give you the two other features I think are important. It tells you to do it in an iterative fashion, use case-based iterative fashion. So you iterate until you are happy. If you're not happy because our privacy impact assessment is not satisfactory, you go for another cycle, okay? So this is the second thing. And the third, I have to say, it's because it was invented a long time ago, but it already asked people to model the data flow. And one main concept that I like very much is what they call the touch points. Actually, when from a stakeholder to another stakeholder, you have an exchange of data, okay? And it was the first standard to me to highlight this. And the notion of touch point, I have not seen in any other standard, okay? So you also have a very standard approach. This is a Microsoft security approach called Stride, actually. What it says is you start from security properties, you convert them into security threats, and you try to understand how you deal with it, okay? So there is an initiative called Linden, and Linden is doing the same, but from privacy properties to privacy threats, okay? So the properties are on the left: unlinkability, anonymity, plausible deniability, undictatability, confidentiality, and so forth. And the threats are, let's say, kind of the opposite: linkability, identifiability, and things like that. Okay, so they come up with actually a taxonomy of the threats and give you some guidelines about existing solutions. So it's a very interesting piece of work. Okay. Now, 27550 is, we are working on the second draft, which will be internally available in June. Okay, so when we talk about draft, it's only internal work. Okay. It has to go into publishable version so that people have access to it. Okay, so it's going to be next year. I think it's going to be pretty fast. Okay, but it starts with a number of considerations. For instance, the difference between security and privacy, the integration of system engineering. Okay, the integration of risk management, and then all the processes I mentioned. Okay, now we have lots of annexes because it's still ongoing, okay? We still need to converge. So we have, you see, supporting agile programming, okay? Supporting domains. So for instance, if I am in the smart grid domain or smart city domain, is it the same? Yeah?
Going down the left side there, you have negotiation, organization. What is that? Gestion?
Okay, so I answer. Okay, so negotiation is very important for data sharing agreement. So actually, you have data, and then the data controller or data controller has to negotiate with data controller. Okay, this is negotiation. Okay, organization is how you include the knowledge and the competence. For instance, you need to have a DPO in Europe. Okay. But you need also have to have private people who are knowledgeable in privacy engineering, privacy management, things like that. You need to put in place a repository of PIAs, a repository of the data sharing agreements. This is organization, okay?
But, no, I'm sorry, but after that, GESTION, I am not recognizing that, and I apologize for my ignorance.
Which one? Say it again.
Risk management.
Oh, that's French. It means management. Okay, so because I made the presentation in French and I forgot to, sometimes you read it and you still see it's English. Okay, so it means management. Sorry for that. Okay, that's a good point. Okay, okay. So you can see we have supporting domains, supporting agile programming, supporting small organizations. Okay, we have to have a version which says, okay, if you're a small organization, how you deal with it. Okay. Then, as I said, the objectives, we are not sure. So we have privacy protection goals I mentioned. We have privacy engineering objective. We have decided to put it in an annex. Initially, the first version was actually in the introduction, but people said, I'm not sure we agree, so let's put it in an annex, okay? Then Annex C is very important. I call them cheat sheets. So they are all, let's say, the body of knowledge that have been accumulated in the last 3-4 years. They are very interesting, okay? Then Annex D is about something that's very important to NIST, what they call risk models, okay? And so how you calculate the risk, what is the Excel sheet I'm using, just to simplify, okay? And I can tell you, you have two Excel sheets, with the one from NIST for business, and the one from CNIL for privacy impact assessments, okay? So, but there could be others, okay? And then we have methodologies. So this one, I'm not sure about the content, but I will negotiate with John about what we put in terms concerning PMRM, Linden, Prepare. Okay. So conclusion is that 27550 is in the making, okay? It provides a system lifecycle process. This is very important. The engineer wants to see that, okay? He refers to that, okay? It integrates the current body of knowledge, but this body of knowledge is evolving, okay? So the standard will change over time, okay? Now, concerning standard guidelines in general, as you see, is still in the making, okay? I believe there is a core of good common standards, but I also believe they should be complemented by specific privacy guidelines, okay? For smart cities, IoTs, and big data. And actually, there are working groups currently working on that. Okay. Thank you.
So there's a lot of effort already expended in getting people to write secure code. What extra effort is now needed to get people to write privacy-enabled code in an enterprise? Is it a whole new thing that has to be learned again, or?
I'm not sure about the question, but I would say that we heavily rely on security, okay? And of course, when it comes to the security part of privacy, there is a Venn diagram because, of course, security and privacy have a common intersection, okay? And of course, we will rely on this, okay? Concerning a secure coding of privacy is still research, okay? I've seen, for example, I was part of a project where we have an ontology where we can verify the properties are done okay. But this is really research. In practice, I'm not sure yet, okay? So we are not as mature as in security, but of course we will reuse when it comes to security on all the practices you mentioned.
Well, it's even questionable whether or not secure code implementation has got mature, so I guess that's the point too.
Yeah, I would agree with you, okay? Yeah, So privacy is still even behind.
Right.
Would it be fair to say that privacy, we were discussing in the terms of having user stories around privacy, and isn't that just a whole new set of features? And you have to add those features in, and those also have to be coded securely along the way. But you're talking about a whole new set of function, essentially, if your application has not included that previously.
Yeah, that's definitely it. So, we need. So there is an attribute I didn't mention, but it's about flexibility. So actually, the version for privacy management and privacy engineering you integrate in the next 5 years might not be the same as the one in the next 10 years. So we need to anticipate that. You need to have this flexibility, okay? So that actually you are prepared to change your implementation, even an implementation that has been deployed. This is a very critical issue that we have to cope with, because otherwise you come up with a generation of systems. It's like IP address, okay? We live with the problem of IP addresses, okay? And this is the issue we have to deal with.
So I have a question. Can I hold the microphone? So before I ask the question to Antonio, and thank you for this wonderful presentation, I do agree with both gentlemen that I think coding and making it secure and implementing privacy within your applications are two different things. You have to look at other things. Certainly you should as well provide secure privacy implementations, but it's a new set of things you have to look at in terms of making or implementing privacy by design in your code. And that's actually a question I wanted to ask Antonio. Before you mentioned something about resources or human resources in order to manage all this privacy engineering. Now, we've spoken about data protection officers within organizations who will be responsible for overseeing all of this, but who will do all the heavy lifting in terms of all the analysis, viewing or reviewing the application landscapes, determining what to implement in code, actually implementing the code? I understand it will be developers, but they need to get some guidance, I guess. What's your take on this in terms of getting up to speed on actually doing this?
Just to say, it's the reason why I'm here. That's I think it's business, right? So we think it's going to be needed, and as Mike said, it's not only about lawyers. It's time that actually we share the work, okay, the burden, okay. The lawyers cannot solve the engineering issues, so we need to work together, okay, and we need to have those consultants. In many cases, they come from the security landscape, okay? So it's good and bad. So security people, they will focus on the security aspect, and they will be very, very efficient there, okay? But we need some fresh thinking, and most of the people working in OASIS PMRM, they are from this new community. So we need to grow a little bit. But this is definitely an issue, and so I'm expecting to see startups, companies, or even the big companies, you know, the big consulting companies. They are creating teams about that, okay? So far, it's more law-oriented, but very quickly, it's going to focus on engineering orientation, I'm sure.
How do you address the issues that, on the basis of Internet of Things, especially the level between the thing, that's the first system who collects data, most of the things right now in the which are available are not secure, they don't have any kind of description. So the first system, it doesn't know anything about privacy, so it will collect all the data it can, but you can transmit it to the app. So isn't there a gap that the connection to the thing is left out.
Yeah, the gap is there not only because of what you say, but because actually the ecosystem is complex. So one company is doing this, another company is doing other things. So we have to be very careful. And those are the guidelines I'm thinking about. And we are still learning. And the body of knowledge, just to be frank, is not yet there. But as we deploy, we will discover them. Okay, and there will be those litigations. And when you see the litigation, then you have issues. In the IoT study period, one of the rapporteurs is US, Eric Hibbard. I'm not sure from which company, but he told me that in the US, you have working groups on IoT, and it's always one engineer and one guy in lawyer, and they see the litigation issues or potential, depending on whether you see it positively or negatively. So it's a learning curve, okay? But we have to take that into account, precisely, okay?